Welcome to Let's Have the Conversation. I'm Desiree B. Stevens, and I pathologize the system of whiteness. God, it has been an absolute insane. I'm really trying to honor the rhythm of what was supposed to be a fun September stew. This was supposed to be fun and do the Gilded Age till now. And I'm trying, guys. I'm trying. Good morning, Lisa. And yes, Mia, inhale, exhale is right. I'm trying. I'm trying. And thank you. Go on, you sunshine. Um, but I also have to honor the truth of what's happening in the world today, right? And bringing that to the forefront. So it's been harder to kind of keep up with our theme, and I hope I'm doing a good job improvising with tying in today with yesteryear, sort of thing, right? Today, after the memorial of Charlie Kirk and just watching um, the banding together of nationalist ideas over the weekend, I kind of sat just like paralyzed in a way, which I think many of us feel, and you're trying to figure out what to do, say, feel, how to process. Ria says, love the greenery. Thank you. I enjoy my backyard so much. And whilst the weather is lovely, where it's not too hot to be out here or too cold, I'm going to kind of enjoy sitting out here. So today I wanted to get into the tending of grief. I think that that is something that is super important. I said last week that the core tenet, I would say, of decolonization is releasing that binary. So there is grief in these moments. There's so much grief in so many ways, right? And multiple truths. So today we're going to kind of get into that, right? I have my 3 talking points, so get ready. And this replay will be available this evening. I know I have been behind on that. It's because I've been, as soon as I get off a live, then I'm like writing something else or, inspired to do something else. But I do want to ensure that these things are available and accessible in a more timely manner. So thank you for giving me that space. And I can also recognize where I have failed in doing so. And I do not intend on failing you guys, right? Because you're here, you're supporting me, you're trying to do this work. And I don't want it to feel overwhelming, like, oh my God, here's 3 episodes to listen to. So I'm going to get back into the rhythm of doing that. So take a breath, then a sip. Mm. And let's get into what I mean by tending grief. So we're going to have 3 talking points, right? 1, we are witnessing the death rattle of an empire, and grief is the gateway. If you're avoiding it, you're avoiding your liberation. 2, holding multiple truths without collapsing is necessary. We don't need to flinch anymore, but we do need to feel. 3, recentering yourself without recentering whiteness, right? This is going to be a skill that's definitely needed with white-bodied people. And a reminder with that is that there is no supremacy without hierarchy, and there's no hierarchy without a funeral, right? And why that one is a key component is because what we are witnessing as non-white people offering liberation and healing work and education is all of a sudden this deep urgency for whiteness to have an escape into community. And I literally help people build community, intentional, intersectional community. And in order to be in that, you have to do the work of dismantling and decolonization. You can't just turn around and use community as a last resource and demand, but we all need to be fighting together. We all needed to be fighting together. The last few days, I've been asking white women, where are you at in the conversation of the Jimmy Fallons, being stripped of free speech. And now free speech, I do not believe that, I think that we need to get to the real meaning of free speech. It is protection from the government. And when the government has influence over the FCC, that is absolutely a violation of free speech. Because I've been seeing the correlation of, well, Charlie Kirk didn't have free speech, and Charlie Kirk absolutely did. He was not silenced by the government. And to the contrary, in his death, he has been lauded up by the government. I hope we could see the difference there, right? His free speech may have been put, a stop in it by a person who decided they no longer wanted to hear what he wanted to say. But free speech does not free us from consequences or personal actions from other civilians. It is quite literally a protection from the federal government. That's it. It's not. Can't say whatever you want. And even within that, you still can't say certain things, right? I gave the example last week. I was like, you can't go into a movie theater and yell fire, right? Because that is dangerous. You are now inciting a situation. So sit with all of that. And let's go back to the top. We are witnessing the death of an empire. Grief is the gateway. And if you're avoiding that, you're avoiding your liberation. The reframe that I want to offer here is that we are in a time of compounded grief, grief of an empire collapse, grief of false identities, grief of truth telling. Holding space for grief isn't just a spectacle, it's a sacred container for transformation. It isn't just political chaos that we're dealing with, it's actual death work. And just like any ending, empire fights to preserve itself. So what we're seeing is grief, denial, and terror, and that comes with its own process. Julie said, thank you for this important clarification. Super, super happy to offer that. I think that we are not offered that clarification enough, right? And so then the correlation, because whiteness demands a monoculture, is that Jimmy Fallon is no different than a Charlie Kirk. And you can have whatever feelings you want in regard to what either one is saying. I'm not here to tell anybody how to feel about whatever. I'm just here to offer some nuance and distinctions in these spaces so that when you're going through this work, when you're actually doing the work of decolonization and dismantling, you understand what you are trying to tear down, right? Lisa says, your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. Yeah, your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. Absolutely, right? That's, you can't do that. The government cannot get involved and be like, we're coming for those who oppose me. That is an absolute violation of free speech in the most obvious and egregious way. Someone not listening to you, right? If people wanted to turn me off, they could absolutely turn me off. You do not need to silence me. You do not need to cancel me. You just need to not follow me. Boom. Billions of people in the world and millions of people to follow. If the government turns around and says Desiree is a problem, that is a violation of free speech. And I hope you guys are out there doing something about that. I say that because I'm asking white women where you're at in these conversations, because the rally cry right now is we are Charlie, which fair. You are Charlie, but you're also Tyler. And the intra-community violence in whiteness is something that is going to impact us anyway. And me saying like access denied to community comes, this is not the first person that's ever been sanctioned basically by the government for speaking. Plenty of Black women have been. Charlie Kirk's company, Turning Point USA, literally has a watch list that they call it of Black educators that is potentially dangerous, right? Because if you know where these people are working and what they're speaking about, it is a scare tactic. And that is normal inside of fascist ways. And we can't pretend that America's not been fascist. Again, I shared another post where it was like, the last time people were silent, 6 million people were gassed and killed. And it's like, God, please see beyond whiteness, right? You know, and beyond American exceptionalism. Like, it is known and documented that the United States of America worked hand in hand with the Nazis of Germany. If you just look, if you just Google, there's a huge, huge history of the collusion and collaboration, right? And then it's a complete and an utter denial and ignorance um, of the lived truths of all of the First Nation people here in this land and all of the enslaved Africans and us as descendants of them, right? To pretend that fascism existed over there and America is the good guy, instead of saying, wow, we need to grieve that we were always a fascist nation. We have always shown up in this world in this way to the global majority. That is also grief, right? Releasing that American exceptionalism, it's difficult because the entire identity is built in American exceptionalism, right? Especially for white bodied people. It's built in the belief that this is a place of freedom, religious freedom, thought freedom, the ability to move up in the world, all of these things. And to grieve that and to sit with the multiple truths that it may be true for some, but it's not for others. And I often share my own experiences as a mixed person, right? As both the granddaughter of Irish immigrants and the great great grandchild of enslaved Africans, I can sit with two very different staunch views of the American experience, right? American exceptionalism in this hand, right, as the granddaughter of Irish immigrants, tells me that yes, it works, right? They came over, they struggled, they were living in the projects, they were raising children. Those children went on to do better than their parents. My mother was the first to graduate college, right? And then their children, which would be me, we are all college educated, we are all homeowners. So that must be true, right? That has to be true. And yes, for some, it has been true. For many others, too many others, it has not been true. And what did that come at, right? What cost did that come at specifically if you're a white body person, right? My grandmother spoke Gaelic. That was not a language that was allowed to be spoken in the home or passed on. What else did she have to give up in order for her children to assimilate into whiteness in that sort of way to have any level of upward mobility? What did they have to release in order to do so, right? Then you come over here as the great great grandchild of an enslaved people, and it's like we haven't come nowhere near far enough, right? Like it's like nowhere near it. I'm still deeply concerned about my children or myself and my own safety simply exiting my own home. I don't go in certain areas and certain spaces. It's just no, right? I live in the South. I will not go but so far into the South for safety reasons. So this is that part of that multiple truths and holding that grief, right? Of the things that we have been taught and we believe to be true. And what we now have to release in order to get to that other side, in order to actually build that community, in order to say, I see this has been all a lie. And what do we do about it? Right. And how do each of us, in our own ways, in our own truths, show up in this work? So, I mean, like computer, open my screen. All right. So the reframe, because guys, I offer you a reframe, is that grief is not weakness. It's an initiation into responsibility, right? Because we're in a time of compounded grief, of the empire collapsing and identities and the truth telling, that holding space is so necessary, right? Instead of that binary, you have to turn around and say, okay, why are these people grieving? And this, I'm speaking directly to white body people because too often in the desire to be the right white person, the good white person, there is this idea that you have to separate yourself from those you team bad and then come on over here into this space and be like, oh, look, I'm good. And it's like, no, no, that's not the work. What are you doing inside of there? How are you seeing the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people mourning Charlie Kirk, knowing the things that he said and stood for, and then also still holding his own humanity in place and space, right? Holding him. Why did he believe these things? Why did he preach these things? How was he able to get so popular preaching these things? All of that needs to be held, right? And I want you to be thinking about the fact that this is not new, right? The shock, the awe. I keep saying that is like, you gotta stop believing that this is new. This is as old as Christianization itself, right? So I wrote about that too. I said the violence you're seeing is not new, it's ancestral. From the Christianization of Europe to the martyrdom of whiteness, white on white violence has always been a part of the imperial project. And if you are to divest, you must grieve not just what was lost, but what was never truly yours, right? When white body people are doing this work in this day and age, we are used as the scapegoat. I'm so glad. Julie said, thank you for this, needed this so badly. We are often used as a scapegoat. And while it is very important to notice the inescapable dangers that non white body people are experiencing here, it is more so imperative, from my opinion, to pay attention to that intra-community violence, right? Because again, that race war is internal. When they are talking, they're not talking to us, right? We are Charlie is a battle cry to the ones of you who may be Tyler. Right. We're already on the outs. That's inescapable, right? Like you could be Candace Owens. And when they come, they're not going to care. They're not. That will not save you. Your thoughts, your rhetoric, your mimicking of their system will not save you. It just simply won't. And white body people, you guys have to really do that work of sitting down and saying, where are we at? Where are we at? Why are we not protesting? I want you just as angry as you seem to be when it comes to anti-racism work, right? That seems to rally you guys up. Act like you can save the men too. I don't know what it is that's going to make you get up and get out there, but I need you up and out there because this is an internal war and your silence will be the death of you. Right? It's inescapable for us. We've been surviving the violence of whiteness since whiteness was created. So this is another Monday. This is another Monday with maybe a little bit more vehemence. It's not, but for you guys, is it an opportunity to do something bigger, greater, and step into community with yourselves, right? And when that work is able to be done, that is how you are able to then create that intersectional, right? Intentional community because you are finding your people. You are sussing them out through the crowds of millions. I said that before with the blue bracelets. I was like, those blue bracelets are not information for us as Black people. Those blue bracelets were literally so white body people could see who's safe amongst you, who shares your similar ideals, possibly. Not for us, because no matter what, white body people are dangerous to us because that's a system of whiteness. Blue bracelet, purple hair, every single tattoo and piercing you could think of. Still dangerous. Does not matter. Race is the first marginalization in a white supremacist society, and that is what this society is founded on. That's those hierarchies. That's a system of whiteness. Miriam says, Amen. Our silence will be the death of us. It absolutely will, right? And we see empire dying, right? So I know that there's this like freeze thing, but this is it, right? That death rattle, that grasping for air, they are doing everything to hold on, right? This is the last final vestige of that system of whiteness holding on. And they have resurrected their own Christ. They have literally made Charlie Kirk, it's no different. It's no different. We are watching time happen in time loops. It's no different. They have deified this man. They have deified him. They have given us a grieving widow, like they gave us a grieving mother for Christ. They have picked her up and made her, this forgiving, loving pillar of Christianity, and they have deified him. And they gave you a new battle cry, right? For the continuation of that Christian nationalist supremacy, right? You start pairing that with, ecumenical documents, eschatological truths, Christian nationalism, Christian Zionism, and you start pairing that with what's happening globally when you start seeing the same sort of violence happening in Gaza and Palestine, a land clearing for Christian nationalism. It is literally about getting that land cleared for the second coming of Christ. I've written about this. When I first started on Substack, I had jumped off of TikTok because it was too volatile to have 60-second conversations about something so deep. And I started writing so I can offer more depth and more nuance into these things. And so some of my first articles are literally about Christian Zionism, nationalism, what was happening, what is currently happening in Palestine, and for the expansion of Christian Zionism, right? So all of that, they are doing all of these things, and white body people have to be the ones that are like, no, no. Lisa says they drew straws, and CK was the shortest. They decided to make him the martyr. Yeah, without even telling him. That's how violent, right? Like maybe he didn't want to leave his family. Maybe his message wasn't this, but he was more powerful to white supremacist Christian nationalist regime dead than he was alive. Many people had not even heard about Charlie Kirk. He was still very much, um, you know, contained to his base. And now he is a worldwide news, right? This is how martyrdom happens, right? And all of a sudden he's been deified in death. And It's very intense because, again, this is going to take white-bodied people to deal with a lot of grief and a lot of recognition of how non-consensual systems of whiteness are, right? If you wanna grieve anything, grieve that. Grieve that the system of whiteness cares so little even about white-bodied people, they will murder a man in front of his wife and then deify him, right? To make everybody else feel better, to push forward their notion of what society should look like. Tiffany says, I honestly had never heard of him until the day he died. Right. Unless you are uh, in that base or watching that base and seeing what is being said and talked about, right? And I said that this was a problem when people were pushing right wing talking points and Christian nationalists off of Facebook. I was like, you guys are just creating an echo chamber. It's not like they will not exist, right? Like, so I immediately, when everybody was pushed off, I immediately went to Parler. I immediately went to Truth Social, and I was like, great. Now you've created a space where they will receive no pushback, and they are just in their echo chambers having a grand old time. And that is exactly what is happening, right? I've been talking about the Gilded Age and the rise of the Klan and how, Reconstruction was never successful. It was put to sleep, and we are living in that now. And those are the things that white body people very specifically are gonna have to deal with and dismantle. Rhea agrees. She had never heard of Charlie Kirk either. Now, not only will we all hear about him, there is a holiday. And like, does it sound familiar? One thing systems of oppression are not is innovative. They found a blueprint that works and it has worked for thousands of years. And they continue putting, you know, that blueprint forward. And that is important to recognize. So, reflection prompts for that first talking point is to ask yourself, what parts of empire have I internalized that are now dying within me? Right? That's part of your grief work because you have thought to yourself whether, you were good enough or not good enough, white enough, not white enough. What does that look like? Because these systems set up those binaries, right? Um, how does that look for you? Right? What have you internalized where empire said that you were not worthy to be a part of it? And then what have you allowed to die within yourself in order to be accepted, in order to move up? There's so many layers to it all, right? What parts of yourself are you grieving the illusion, safety, control, or identity? Right? In what ways have you expected others, especially Black or Indigenous folks, to carry your grief? What does that look like to you, right? What are you demanding from those of us that it's inescapable for, right? How do you want us to hold your grief? What does that look like for you? Why do you feel so entitled to be able to be like, it's all of us together because, and it's like, we've been saying that. So, what does it look like to grieve the fact that you have not listened and we are here now and we want that, right? This is not ha ha ha, you didn't listen. Now look, this is you did not listen. Now's the time for deeper listening and to do the work. What does it feel like to know that that's why we are here? Mia says that Charlie Kirk got a day before Indigenous people and Columbus Day is still on the government calendar, is on brand. Right. It's also, it makes no, please believe me, I do not think that these people are half witted or not intentional at all. Charlie Kirk's day is October 14th. That is also George Floyd's birthday. And that is like a counter, that was like chef's kiss. That was chef's fucking kiss, a kick in the teeth to the Black Lives Matter movement, right? That started with George Floyd in a national sort of way. So for October 14th to be his birthday and to be Charlie Kirk Day, they chose their martyr well. They knew exactly what they were doing, and it shows a pattern of of the blueprint, right? Like it's the same way when you discover that Christian holidays are placed over other holidays. Like, oh, Easter was Ostara. Oh, Christmas was winter solstice, right? It makes things easier for people to swallow, right? If I go and I want to start a cult because cults are so easy to start. And again, if you recognize that your leaders, your teachers, or educators refuse to ever be wrong or do not remain teachable, you are in a cult. Get out. You're not safe. But if I turned around and was like, okay, I'm going to start a cult, and I decided, okay, well, we're going to have new celebrations to celebrate this new founded way of living, what's going to be easier is to replace what you've already been celebrating, right? Replace something that feels familiar so you're not at loss. Right. And you'll find your own way for a while. You'll find your own way to keep your own rooted truths in that. But eventually they will fall into assimilation to the dominant culture. And that is what's happening, right? George Floyd was such a big motivation for Black Lives Matter movement, for this DEI push, for the anti-racism culture that developed since 2020, and replacing that with the martyr for Christian nationalism is absolutely ingenious for them to do because it gives them a binary. So, right, it's like, forget you and look at what we're doing. So, talking point two, holding multiple truths without collapsing. We don't flinch anymore, but we do feel. The world is not binary. In the midst of collapse, you'll be asked to hold contradictions, pain and peace, loss and freedom, complicity and innocence. Healing requires you to sit in paradox. You can be a survivor and a perpetuator of harm. You could be grieving and be the source of someone else's grief. Truth isn't binary, it's braided, right? And I want us to really sit with that because, very specifically, working with white bodied people, right? In mixed spaces, which I love, is I really enjoy the spaces that I curate because you can see white people really doing the work and really showing up. And this includes white men, femmes, they, thems, all of you guys that are in my spaces, whether it's here, whether it's in the Makeshift Happen group, in the Intersectional Allies group, or just on my regular Facebook page, the way you guys show up vulnerable and willing to take correction and sit in the discomfort is a beautiful thing, right? And it allows space for accountability. It allows for those of us who are not in white bodies to see you show up in that way and for you to recognize that you still bring harm, right? But also for us to sit with the fact that we have a space to say that without being harmful, but just being honest. Like you can be both. You are both, right? And for, as a disarming point, I use myself as examples because I think it's very important to recognize that I also self-reflect over all of these systems. And I've shared over and over again, parenting in and of itself, as it is created inside of this nationalist society and within these hierarchies, is a relationship of abuse, right? Because it's hierarchical. I'm the parent, they have a child, they cannot leave, they are financially dependent, they are emotionally dependent, they are 100% dependent on me with no escape option, no escape route, right? I lose my shit in here. They're just stuck with me losing my shit. They can't say, I'm tired of her losing her shit every Tuesday and I want out of here. They just got to suck it up, right? So, me recognizing that I could be both solace, comfort, love, joy, but also their pain, their grief, and their oppressor simultaneously allows me to recognize how I'm showing up in their spaces, right? It allows me to say, okay, let me be mindful of how I word this. Let me see how this is impacting them. Let me see how my presence or what I'm saying um, just automatically feels overbearing just because it's like, oh God, here comes mom again, right? Here comes a parent, here comes an adult, all of those things. What does that look like? So I'm intentional because I am both of those things to them. I'm intentional about how I show up. I'm intentional about how I am going to parent, how I am going to discipline, how I am going to guide. And that happens inside of any type of hierarchical system. If you are a white man, then you need to recognize that inside of these systems as patriarchy, you can love your wife, you can love your children, you can love your friends. You still show up, right? As her oppressor, as their oppressor. You can have Black friends, you still show up as their oppressor. And right? Both and those things are necessary. If you are a Black man, you can see how you may be a part of patriarchy, but you are not patriarchy because white women 100% will always have systemic power over you. You need to recognize that. You also need to recognize you're not white men. You are not going to win the patriarchy, right? They're barely winning the damn patriarchy because it's set up as a pyramid scheme to keep people performing. So all of those things, what does that look like, right? White women sitting inside of that. You are both upholders of the patriarchy and victims of the patriarchy. You both oppress all Black people and are oppressed by cis hetero white patriarchal systems, holding it, holding it holding all those truths, holding all that grief, sitting in the paradox, really like, wow, so much is happening that they've never just allowed us to sit and think about. And that's because the core of it is capitalism. Who has time to think when you need to eat, right? I have a lot of time privilege and I'm still like, oh shit, it's house taxes. Got to make sure those are paid. What's going on with this bill? Did I make enough this week? This is the work that I do. And it's not always enough money. Like that's just the reality of it. So even someone with me with tons of time privilege, those weights still exist, both and someone that is more dependent on capitalism and navigating it has even less time to think about all of these truths. And that is what I mean by sitting with the multiple truths, right? So, the reframe that I offer here is your nervous system can learn to sit in the tension of truth without collapsing or lashing out. And that is part of decolonization too. And if you're white and you happen to be grieving Charlie Kirk's murder, this does not make you a bad person. I've been seeing that too. That's more that intra community violence, right? Oh, if you're mourning him, you're a Nazi. And I'm like, you got to stop. Watching you guys is like, it's like my children, who I absolutely, and this is not disrespectful because I actually respect and like my children. I see my children as whole individual people that I have the privilege of nurturing into amazing adults with autonomy, with their full-fledged sovereignty, agency, and autonomy. So I say this out of a deep love and care, not as in a hierarchical sense, like my children are less than me and don't know shit. I know everything. But it's like watching my children, who I know love themselves and love each other deeply, but they will fucking fight over the silliest things, and call each other out. And I'm like, y'all both do that. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you guys doing to each other? So imagine, right? You're saying you're just in touch with your humanity. You're feeling multiple truths about the Charlie Kirk murder, and you are allowed to do that because you're human and you're trying to touch your humanity. You can feel all of those things and not be called a Nazi. But imagine being called a Nazi for this, but not being called a Nazi for holding up redlining, not being called a Nazi for refusing to do reparations, not being called a Nazi for not pushing land back, not being called a Nazi for having a fucking HOA and telling people how to live where they pay, right? It's all the same. So you got to release that. You are allowed to feel however the hell you want to feel. That's on you. And you can't police how other people feel, right? Like I said, I'm not the person that's going to celebrate somebody's death. That's just not who I am as a person. Like, but I understand why others would, right? I gave that little ding dong, the witch is dead sort of analogy in regard to it. And, some people are celebrating maybe one last person that makes them feel wildly unsafe in the world. That is also a recognition of humanity, even if you do not do it yourself, even if you do not agree, even if you do not align, because those are two different things, right? So, but if you are grieving, pause and ask yourself why. What does he represent to you? Then I want you to go deeper. Does that grief silence other people's truths, right? Because we're often taught to think in those binaries and act in those binaries. So you turn around and say, we don't speak ill of the dead. Whiteness loves a one-liner, loves it, right? It's really quick. It's a wonderful way to brand. When you look at America and systems of Christianity and colonialism and Christianization as a business, businesses love branding material, right? I'm loving it. It's McDonald's. You know it. You know it. You may never eat McDonald's a day in your life, but you know what those golden arches look like, right? Christianity. You may not be a Catholic, but you understand a crucifix. You may not be Catholic, but you know what a rosary is. These are branding materials, right? These are marketing tools. Same, right? So like we don't speak ill of the dead. Why? Did they do good in life? I'm going to speak about their life, right? To eulogize someone, to remember them after death is to remember their life. Now, I do feel that people should be afforded the full breadth of their life. And again, that goes into multiple truths, right? I listened to Mrs. Kirk's entire um, interview after like 48 hours after her husband died. And her truth is true, right? He was a wonderful husband and father to her. I love that for her. So glad that you experienced that. You also have to hold truth that a lot of what he said did not make him a wonderful person to other people. That is absolutely fine. And that is what I mean by holding multiple truths, right? So, whiteness has taught you to collapse everything into one right way. And the liberation begins when you stop needing things to be tidy. Life is messy, friends. Take a breath. Swear I try to honor this 30-minute time limit that I've given myself. So I do again appreciate you guys sitting with me longer every single time. Every single time. Reflection prompts for this. What truth am I avoiding because it threatens my identity? Right? What does it feel like in my body when I hear multiple truths that don't resolve? Right? These are things to sit with, to really ask yourself, to say, what is this? Why do I feel like I'm Charlie? Right? Like when these men are chanting, we are Charlie, what in it do you see besides just the white man? Right? When women are there, when they are standing by their man, what do you see? Do you feel what's going on? And a lot of it is because uh, what Charlie said wasn't terribly revolutionary. It's normal conversation that happens inside of way too many white homes that has often been ignored. And now people have platforms. So those brothers, fathers, cousins, uncles that was ignored at Thanksgiving table or Sunday football or just a regular Tuesday have a platform, right? And if they could be murdered for that, that feels very dangerous to them. That's multiple truths. That's multiple truths, right? So what part of your identity is tied into that too, if you are a white body person? What does that look like? What are you scared of? Ask yourself that. Sit with that. Work on that. Also, talking about three, that's where we're at. Because there's more reflection prompts, but I'll put that into the replay. Hi, Jen. Hi, Linda. Recentering yourself without recentering whiteness. I am big on saying you have to decenter whiteness, right? Decentering whiteness does not mean a loss of self. It means decentering the system of whiteness, right? Jen says, stop giving white men microphones. Actually, not, because again, we are flattening. There are white men that need, microphones. I just finished listening to Bill Burr's comedy, and I definitely don't want to take away his microphone. I definitely don't, right? But I definitely want to see more people, very specifically white people, very specifically white women out there standing by their man and not just in white nationalism, right? Like, I asked the question in the intersectional allies group, and one person was very honest, and they were like, we hate white men, and we do not want to stand with them because they've oppressed us for millennia. And I'm like, I hear you, but and right? But and white women, you have oppressed us also side by side with that guy for millennia. So why are you guaranteed a space and place inside of community, a space to feel safe to dismantle, a space to feel safe to be vulnerable, but they are not? And this is where I often task white women to offer white men the same grace that Black women have offered you for millennia. They also deserve a place to unpack. Again, this is like exiting DV, right? And somebody has to be creating these safer spaces. And I have no problem. I love doing what I do. I love curating and creating those spaces, right? But I need you guys to step in and do that as well, right? And that's recentering of self. Ginge says, I'm not giving them meow meow until we can get autonomy back. And that's fine. uh who splits truths? Lisa. Are you talking about Bill Burr? And if so, tell me more. So recentering yourself without recentering whiteness. There's no supremacy without hierarchy, and there is no hierarchy without a funeral. The death of an empire is not the death of white people. I think that that is a lot of what's getting confused in these broader spaces of white nationalism. Jen says, have a hard time with Bill Burr because usually when white men are pointing at white women, it's to take the heat off themselves. How do we know Bill Burr is actually dismantling? Bill Burr has a black wife. That's enough for me and black children. And has. And not once in any of his comedy has he not taken accountability for his own roles in upholding systems, right? Even in the very popular one where he was like, white woman, you swung your Gucci boot right over black people, black women, and you kind of took front and center and things. He said, we're saying, they are saying, sit here right next to us and take your lashing. He owns it. He's not beating up on white women. And white women could not hear that even when I said that. He is saying, sit here right next to us. And he's also not using his black wife and children as a scapegoat. He's not saying, oh, no, not me as a white man. I got a black wife and kids. He's saying, me as a white man, I have upheld these systems. Here's what I've learned. And fellow white people, white women included, sit down next to me and listen. That's the difference. He owns it. He takes accountability. His last special right now, he was talking about, a lot of different things. And he has never not owned his own roles in it. Oh, you didn't even know he was married? Very private, right? I don't even know the name of his son. I think his daughter's name is out there. He's very private about his marriage and life and wife. And I respect that because he doesn't use her as a token. He just happens to be. But if you're asking me, that is why I know he's doing the dismantling work because she is a very outspoken Black woman. He is not married to a Black woman who is performing systems of whiteness. She is an outspoken Black woman, and just the way he shows up in the world and the work and how he owns his accountability as both and. Oh, well, thank you. See, Jen said, okay, that's a bit different than I thought, and I didn't trust my own take on it. And that's okay, right? Because that initial take on it, right? That's the both and, right? White women seeing white men speaking is an immediate trigger. Right. It immediately opens up trauma of fathers, of patriarchy, of harm that has happened for millennia to white women and femmes. That's yes. I, yes. But then in that, you take a pause and you breathe and you actually listen. That's the same thing that we have to do when we step into spaces and are working with white women. White women are usually so much more open to working with Black women because they're like, oh, well, I will work with other women. But when we step into those spaces, we have to then go through the process of that too, right? Like, gosh, these are the same women that have harmed us, owned us, harmed our children, created spaces that are unsafe for our children in our neighborhoods, in our schools. And we have to do all of that and still show up. Right. And still give you grace and still give you nuance and still give you the space to dismantle. I want you guys to do the same. That's all I'm asking. I'm asking you for to do the same exact thing that we're doing. Sally says, Des, check out Nick Shoulders. He's a singer-songwriter. I went to his show in KC and thought about your work. He's a white man who deserves his mic. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Send me that because matter of fact, let me screenshot. Jen says, they put all their accountability on women and the women around them. I'm suspicious of any white man who just starts yelling about any woman. And he doesn't do that, though, right? He doesn't. And I get that because I have this same conversation with Black people when I'm doing this work with white women. They will say the same thing, just insert white woman. They put all their accountability on all their accountability on men because white women blame white men, and we round and round and go in this circle as if there's never been an escape or way out or what have you. And again, multiple truths, and that is a really difficult spot to be in. Right? Again, it's grief work, and it's tending to the grief of being both harmed and the harmer. Right? Perpetuator of harm and victim of harm is not a comfortable place to be. But dismantling and decolonization work is uncomfortable, right? Community building is uncomfortable. It can't just be something that's extractive. Well, we're all in danger now, so let me into community. No, that's not safe because you will come into community with those same extractive behaviors and demand something with zero accountability, none whatsoever. And that is not fair. Thanks, Sally. Sue says, and I think when we as, oh, shucks. when we as white women take other white women to task, we must be prepared for them to throw us under the bus. It is work. It is definitely work, right? I I do not have as many I'm not as successful, capitalistic speaking, as I could be or should be because I make people uncomfortable. For every person that subscribes, when I put out something that's uncomfortable, God, over the weekend, I had to freeze because I'm like, I finally hit my 30,000 a year mark on Substack and I got 10 unsubscriptions because I started talking about white women owning spaces and places, right? And like, what does this look like? And this is an intra-community violent situation. Unsubscribe, unsubscribe. And okay, what am I going to do? Right. I still want to show up in this work truthfully. But there are so many ways that we bring harm to those trying to do the work. And to build community, you just have to do it anyway. It's going to be uncomfortable, right? You can't conform, you can't bow. You're just going to have to do it and do it uncomfortable. Jim says, I always get snippets of him, too many other things to focus on. One white guy and figure out the truth of him. Too many other things I need to learn about to reduce harm. And that's fair. I'm not saying you have to. What I am saying is we cannot flatten the experience and say, in general, white men do not need mics. That's what I'm saying, right? Like that's a very blanket statement that shuts off people that are actually doing the work of dismantling, that are showing up in this work, that are speaking truth to power, and to silence one um, voice that is needed because that's just a comfort, right? Kate, like Kate said, right to comfort. That's like, okay, well, let's just take away everybody's mics. No, no, you can't. I, you can't. Their voices are just as important. And I want to see more of those nuanced conversations inside of whiteness. I want to see more of picking up those. I need to see less, very specifically, from white women hating of white men and more trying to figure out how the fuck to work with those that are working with you. Did I freeze, Lisa? Oh, you see. Julie says, I never wanted to unsubscribe, but it's taken me 6 months of digestion message enough to speak up again. And that is so fair. That is so fair. I've had people, right? I became popular. I've been doing this work for about 10 years, a little over 10 years, but I became popular thanks to TikTok. And I've had people that listen to me maybe once or twice and like even booked like a one-on-one session and then just was like, absolutely not. And they've come back like 3 years later and was like, okay, so remember when we were talking about that is that deep truth, right? That is it. It's not, this is not, I'm not offering a quick fix. I'm not promising that at all, right? I mean, I am promising generational work, right? I am promising that the outcome is actual true community, right? Where you don't need to conform, where you could show up your whole fucked up, messy, confused, I'm going to get this wrong self and just be human. So I do not expect, what I am hoping is that people just would like, it's $8 a month. Like, even if you don't like what I'm saying, maybe other people are. And like, I'm also surviving capitalism. Really? Why is it freezing again? Hmm. What about now? Am I frozen? Okay, it's back. All right, cool. Let me see. Tiffany says, sitting with the uncomfortable nature of this takes time for sure. Unlearning isn't easy. I'm so thankful for the way you make me stop and think in a new way. Awesome, awesome. And I appreciate that, right? And it's very much why there are like the Facebook groups and places and spaces to be in because it's just a space you could sit in, right? Like you could just sit and hear and question and just be. I'm very much believe um in having those spaces and I really want to get into more in person community because online is just not enough. But anyhow, listen, we are we're almost at an hour, folks. Okay. So Where the heck was I? Reframe. The death of an empire is not the death of white people. It's death of the illusion that whiteness must dominate in order to belong. White on white violence from Christianization to Charlie Kirk shows us that the war isn't us versus you. It's whiteness against anything that refuses to assimilate. Recentering self is not the same as recentering whiteness, especially in Black spaces, right? White folks, your work is to grieve and process in community with each other without extraction. That is, I don't want you pulling. Come, lay it at the altar. Whatever you need to do, sit down, be uncomfortable, ask the questions, specifically in my space. I can't speak for other Black women, educators, healers that are doing this work. I team with those who believe in healing as a way to community building. So if you are in a space that says curated or, run by Desiree B. Stevens, that you're safe there for that, right? I would jump in the comment section quick and be like, we don't do that. You got to allow people to be wrong and make mistakes and have questions. And as long as you're willing to be, guided along on that journey, you're going to be fine and you're going to be fully safe wherever I am. Sally says, wisdom of the sower, when you're planting seeds in darkness, not all will grow. This is true. This is true. Okay. So the reframe here, right, is that the most dangerous thing about whiteness is not only the violence towards Black people, right, which you have now accepted in the past 5 years, is that it devours its own. And that's the new thing you have to accept. Your healing isn't supposed to be invisible. It's supposed to be self-responsible. Decentering whiteness means centering your own grief and community with other white folks. And decolonization has to be something that you see as sacred. It's not soft, though, right? It is accountability and it's composted. It's all of the work happening at the same time. And that is not easy. It's not. And for people who are in therapy, how long have you been in therapy? You didn't go to a couple sessions and turn around and say, okay, I'm all better now. Right? You realize that you touched this layer and wow, okay, I processed that. And now there's more layers and more layers. And that's the same thing as decolonization. The reason why I never went, when I realized when I was on a therapy track, when I realized that becoming a therapist, that the code of ethics there would not let me tell people what to do. I was like, oh, that's not that's not what I can do. I want to be able to tell people what to do. And not in a controlling way, but like how I offer, here's your, praxis, here are some actionable steps, or to just be able to say, no, here's what you should do instead. Right. And in that field, in that sort of way, did not allow me to do that. So I was like, okay, we'll stop that and we'll find ways to work that around that. But there's always going to be layers, right? There's always deeper parts of yourself to meet. And I'm okay with offering grace because people can truthfully only meet you as deeply as they have met themselves. And systems of whiteness demands not only a monoculture, but it demands that people be superficial. Hey, how you doing? I'm good. Everything's going well. Work's great. Kids are doing good, right? You don't really, that's not, I always ask people when people say, how are you doing? I'm like, you want the truth? Because I'm fucking tired. I'm tired. I'm worried. I'm like, it froze again? Let me know when I'm back. Is it back? Is it back? Is it back? Is it back? Oh gosh. Okay. Am I frozen again? How about now? Okay. Yay. I was getting a call in, so that might have been what froze it. All right, let me see. Lots of freezing over here. God, I hope the replay is not frozen, and I apologize for that. My Wi-Fi signal is super strong. I don't know what's going on. What was I saying? Oh, so people can only meet you as deeply as they met themselves. So when people ask me, how am I doing? I ask them, do you want the truth? Right? Because I could just give you the generic answer. And whiteness wants that monoculture. It wants that generic answer. Right. And when you're doing the work of decolonization, it is asking you to meet yourself deeper than you've ever met yourself before. Right. And in turn, when you meet yourself that deep, you will meet others that deeply. Somebody said, I got out and came back and it's good now. Good. Hopefully it's good on the replay. So listen, the reflection prompts for this one is, where am I asking Black folks to hold my process? Right? That is something that is necessary, right? What would it look like to build a grief circle rooted in accountability, not performance? Where have I been more committed to being seen good rather than doing good? and there's more, and I will add that into the replay. But what I want you guys to do as I end this up, right, is I want you to hand on your chest, stomach, hold these truths, right? Because it is deeply uncomfortable. But we are watching the death of an empire. And as unsafe as it feels, I want you to get into your ancestral work, especially as we're moving into October, right? As an Irishman, I love October and Samhain, and ancestral work is when I do my deepest work with my folks. And as we are moving into that space, right, really tap into the fact that you're here. Even if you're a white body person, you were not always considered white. So if you are still here, you are a continuation of your ancestors, right? And you need to touch their rebellion, right? Their hell no, right? Their rage, their grief. Touch that and know that we could get to the other side of this, but it's going to take work and it's going to be super duper uncomfortable work. But we are watching it die. And that is absolutely okay. That is what we are looking for. And not everybody will be able to go, right, to where we're going, to what is being built. And that is okay because that's just that's just a part of life. Death is a cycle in life. Okay. So that's it for today. I am going to hop off of here. I am going to be going to the Cardi B meet and greet today. I love me some her. I find her to be absolutely amazing and authentic and real. And ever since I've seen herself on Love and Hip Hop, I feel like my little sister is winning. We're from the same part of the Bronx. And she is absolutely adorable to me. So I'm very excited to go and meet her and just be like, I see you, girl. Keep doing you. So listen, take a breath, drink some water, move your body. There is work to be done, and we can do that in community. I will see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you so much. Bye.